Well, the mystery of the German mountain unit that was missing has been solved. It was on the turn record track with a value that it does not have. Here in July, somehow, I don't know, it didn't get placed in the earlier and got placed in the later. Maybe because I found two counters with that name on it that I tried to determine which one to put where. But, none of the values, well, the full strength value is there originally of the regular unit. Now it's been pulled out. It can never reach that full strength. That may be wrong. Maybe it can. Let's see. No, it can reach one under that full strength now. And then someday it upgrades to the assault unit, which doesn't really matter. I'm not going to worry about the numbers on the units. The hell with them. But it's just such a headache dealing with setting up the reinforcements, placing them, and then when it comes to when they actually come in, usually you're withdrawing stuff. Oh, look, I forgot about a German replacement that has to find some place to live. Oh well, so I didn't even finish the month. All right, well, into July, and we'll throw the supplies out and see sometime late in this month. I think we're going to see an assault. So I basically just flew through about 3 turns. Took about 5 minutes per turn, really. Plus I went and made some tea and everything. But you know what? Nothing's happening. It's just shifting these troops around. One of the problems is finding the units that are damaged so that you can recuperate them. This is more of a problem in a sense for the Germans because they actually were at a point where they had all their troops on the board. Otherwise, you could just keep building the units, the new units. Of course, you don't get enough replacements to build those up to full strength, and it's kind of nice to have full strength units, especially for an offensive. That's where the French are beginning to peter out now. They're out of their 6-point units damn near, which means I pretty much have to pull units off the line. But for example, with the Brits, I'm having trouble finding a damaged unit. I see some damage markers. They're flipped units, but it's hard to tell what can and can't be. So like this flip unit is flipped because it was a 9.5 BEF unit on the back. It's now a 7, and it's permanently that. So you really kind of have to investigate a lot of the counters to find one, and you kind of find them by accident. It's not like you have some, oh yeah, I know there's units here that need to be repaired. Because when you're trying to smooth the line, you're doing exactly the opposite to what's conducive to finding the units. You're spreading them around, shifting them everywhere, which way. So, you end up with not a clear idea of what's where. Another thing to note, even the victory conditions, the demoralization factors, have a slight annoyance edge to me. I was noticing, oh look, we're at 800 for the Germans now. They've caught up to the French. This is because of the 65 turn. I don't remember if I paid at the beginning of this turn. I don't really care. I ended up paying again because I think I forgot to. But that's not parity. Okay. Germany gets affected at 3,000. France gets affected at 1,500. These numbers cannot be compared. They're just numbers on a track related to numbers in the rules, and there's nothing to help you. That's kind of the problem I have with a lot of the feelings of the game. It doesn't feel like the designer put too much effort to make this easier to play. It's not a terribly complicated game, but the whole game, is kind of some innovative ideas on a very, very standard old-time type framework. The innovative idea is the firepower table, and a number of other factors. Certainly the map with its little hex sides, etc. The demoralization for a game of this type. It's not, hey, you need these cities, because that's not what World War I was about. It's pretty clear It's hard to tell what World War II, it's harder to tell what World War II was about. But World War I was clearly about just grinding the opponent's economy down, essentially, and their manpower, etc., their military ability to resist. So that all makes sense. But they're all put together in a way that doesn't terribly make it easier. Or more attractive, say, in the case of the map or whatever, but I don't know what you can do there. There's a point at which you have to make these compromises. You have to say, okay, either I have to cut the Gordian knot and come up with something completely different, or I have to trim away some of the mechanics, some of the complexity, whatever. And it's not like there's a lot of complexity here. In order to provide something that's going to be able to reach more people. And I don't feel like this has done that. I feel like this has really refused to make those compromises and ended up in something that, as I've noted, is difficult to actually play. You know, I mean, what I want to be doing is I want to be allocating, to some extent or another, these grand offensives. And it's certainly capable, it's certainly possible to do that. But I'm all tied up in this moving my units around and trying to get everything perfect, and these responses shifting back and forth. So the French have been pushing forces here into the Paris region. I've got to shift more of my German weight into that sector. I've got to worry about the British. For the British, they're at a point where actually they kind of need to attack because they need to kill some men. They're beginning to pool up replacement points. So they may need to do an offensive. Just a minor one, just to kill some guys. To me, these are, I don't know, too many little piddly factors that are getting in the way of some sort of broad scheme. And in a sense, the actual motivation to why you're attacking, I gotta kill men, I gotta waste supply points, whatever it is part of the problem. You know, it's not a grand scheme. It's I have to do these little administrative things to keep going. And it really doesn't make that much difference. I'm going to cause a certain amount of damage on my offensives, and I'm going to take a certain amount of damage. I don't want them to be too broad because, well, that may put me at risk. Of course, you could push your chances. You could say, okay, well, the Germans might run out of supply before I do, and then I'll get an advantage there or whatever. And that's what we saw, was the Germans managed to crush the French supply enough that they could take their, hey, I get the supplies at the first of the month. I get to maybe make a breakthrough on that turn, even if the fortification lines are in place, etc. I don't think we're going to be at that position again. I don't know. It doesn't feel like the Allies have that kind of desire to completely crush the Germans through that massive offensive. But maybe that's the right spirit to achieve the real goals. It's difficult for me to play that way, to try to break the other guy's supplies beforehand. I think that would produce the right dynamics, but it's tiresome. It's really tiresome for me to do that. I can appreciate that will cause realistic play, historical play. But I can also say, I'm not sure I want to do that. The calculation of the offensives, etc., is kind of painful. Especially when you run up against it and you do it for a few turns and you know you're not going to break through until you wear their supplies out. That's the tough call for me. Now, maybe it'll happen eventually. Maybe I'll push it that far eventually. But so far this year, I have not. And for all those wrong reasons, an Allied offensive is launched in the Paris salient. It's a weak spot for the Germans. It was a good place to hit. It's kind of interesting. It's almost always during the opponent's turn that I notice where I want to hit. Because it's basically where I'm saying, there's a weakness there. I got to do something about it. I can't. Well, as a player, I might be paying that attention too. But it's just kind of funny that it's always the moment where the enemy learns about that mistake and says, ah, fuck it, it's just too hard, that I end up jumping in and slamming in. But this is one such case. Quite often when I'm playing in an opposed game, I'm sitting on something like that, and I'm getting away with it for a couple of turns saying, can I just get my troops there? Do I have time? That never happens here. Once I notice it, if I don't fix it, it's going to get slammed, in a game like this especially, where there isn't any other controls. But that's okay. It provides, a framework for which those decisions end up being made, and that's fine. Anyway, it didn't work very well. The Allied forces, even with the artillery bonus, etc., took 11 hits versus 7 for the Germans. But the Brits really did need to damage their Canadians so that they can funnel. They have like one replacement chit for them, and they're going to get another one this next month. So they have to hit with those Canadians and get them damaged. They may have to hit another round, but now the Germans really do need to push into that area, especially this hex, and try to repair the situation there. Hopefully they have troops, but it doesn't look like it. Doesn't look like they have much, so they may have to try shifting stuff, which is always a royal pain. Alright, on to the last turn of the month. And the turn ends with the assault continuing on this space here. The Allies got less strength into the play. The Germans actually got more by shifting this big old artillery, and granted it's only doubled instead of tripled, but that was able to give them more power in total. But their line is rather stretched at this point, and, well, it doesn't look like they have any withdrawals next turn, but they also don't have any reinforcements coming in. They've just got their replacement points. They got some troops that they're putting together up here that they can throw into that sector, and we can see if that's enough to stem the flow, because really, once that is stopped, the Allies, once it gets ugly enough in that area, the Allies don't really want to continue the attack. And elsewhere it's ugly too. They don't want to make an attack here, even though they have the river line crossed and it's good terrain. They just don't have the strength. That's a pretty big stack there. So this is not the optimal assault any longer. You want to switch fronts. Well, to tell you the truth, nobody really needs to spend anything anymore. Why go in without sort of max strength, as it were? Well, maybe because the Germans are a little weaker, but they don't feel a lot weaker. And I just don't have that, I can grind them down before attitude. And, part of it is because I do know the history, and I do know that didn't work. They didn't really get that huge breakthrough in 15. Now, in 16 they got some significant ground broken through. But the situation just doesn't look like they're going to be able to break them. It was very easy for me with the Germans to continue the assaults that I was making. It's very hard for me to continue with the Allies here. I don't feel like I have any grasp. If I broke through the trench, if I got that initial breakthrough, then I would keep going. But without that initial breakthrough, well, now there are better places to attack, and why am I doing it this turn anyway? It just halt the whole thing. And there's no real cost to that, unlike in La Grande Guerre, where there is a cost to halting an offensive. You make a big deal about an offensive. You can make these minor attacks, and that's what I feel like I'm doing. But once you start a major offensive, whatever that is, and I feel like I already started one and it failed, there is a cost to the national will of, hey, we didn't get anywhere. We lost this many bodies. Yeah, maybe we killed more enemy, but that was hard to justify. The body bag mentality hadn't set in quite yet at this point. Anyway, up this one goes.